And with that, we will welcome Gary Velasco in. Gary, there he is, popping on in. Great to have you on the show tonight, Gary.
How are you?
Hi, I'm well. So, in that little piece, you kind of said that art found you. But what is your background? I mean, there's more than just art to Gary Velasco.
Yeah, I always say it's one of the general questions I get asked. How'd you get involved in this? Well, as a kid growing up, I've always been artistic, doodling around, much like everybody else. Any other normal boy growing up back in the '60s and '70s, playing with models, growing up again, and doodling some more. Yeah, throughout high school was always interested again in art. Never took any lessons on anything because I just I had other interests beside that, but never really took it seriously up until I think just after high school I was going to join the ROTC program because I did want to fly. I did have the bug to fly. I was always interested in airplanes, and that was nixed when I heard my first Van Halen album. Back in '78, I think it came out just prior to that. And I said, well, let me put that on hold. I could always fly later on in my life. And I just pursued then a career to playing guitar, grew my hair out, and then just started playing in bands and had a 40-year career doing that. And during so supported myself with being a painter, mainly house painting. Got bored of that, got involved with a company that does faux finishing and learned everything I could about that trade. And then I got bored with that, started getting into murals because I said, well, I could do this on my own, which I did. Started my own painting contracting company and started doing high-end stuff with murals. And then, I got bored with that again because you're still in your tidy whiteies and carrying, ladders around, and started going to air shows. And I realized that a lot of people would gravitate towards the nose of the airplane where the artwork was, and we're taking pictures. And I'm like, okay, so that got me into nose art, and it was just fascinating and a phenomenon. And I thought, it's like, I wonder if somebody is producing a product that looks like a piece of the airplane with the focal point being the artwork. And nobody was. There was back in the '80s and '90s, there was a ton of aviation magazines like Wings, Air Power, and some of them are still around today, as well as gift catalog companies that flooded your mailbox with aviation gifts and of all sorts, from Shaper Image all the way on down. The Wright Brothers collection, which is part of Sporties. And I thought that was my aha moment where I said, hey, there's something that I can get into where nobody else is doing and have no competition. So to me, it seemed like a perfect idea. However, I didn't realize I had to market myself, and I knew nothing about marketing. I had a good friend of mine, Jim Paytas, who taught me a lot, who that was his trade. And so a lot of it rubbed off. And I learned how, to be able to market myself as an artist, which a lot of artists have trouble doing, which I didn't know, but I hear a lot. So you have to kind of learn that trade as well, too. And in the beginning, a lot of people didn't know what to do with the product. I advertised to some of the magazines. People, are like, what do we do with this? And the first ads were black and white, and then gradually checks started coming in, mail order stuff, that is, and then turned into color ads. And I said, well, that's fine, but I still need to get a bigger, I need to get more stuff coming in order to be able to quit my day job, which was painting and as we, aforementioned. So I said, well, we need dealers. So I started contacting dealers, all the mom and pop places. And again, same rejection. What do we do with this? This is too expensive. No one's going to buy this. And I'm like, no, I think you're all wrong. So, and I thought to myself, okay, who's the biggest dealer of gifts, aviation cliffs around? And it was Sporties, the Wright Brothers collection. So I hounded them for 2 years. Finally, they gave in and said, okay, we'll give you a full page. Give us 6 of your best designs. We'll put them on there, featuring them. And lo and behold, POs were coming in every month from Sporties. Then all the mom and pop places that I originally called who turned me down now wanted them. So that began to snowball and be able to have some capital where I can quit my day job and start investing into the business. So, I mean, that's in a nutshell how it all started. There's a lot more in between how I got to where I am today, doing, real restorations, because I thought to myself, well, there's a, flying billboard. If my name is on some of the nose art, that's free advertising. So a Corsair at Sikorsky ended up being restored on a pedestal, and I inserted myself in that, and I did it pro bono at the time for the Marine Corps, U.S. Marine Corps Auxiliary something there. That was kind of a group that was still there from veterans that maintained that plane. And so it was painted up as Pappy Boynton's media promotional airplane, which was then known as Lulu Bell, but now Lucy Bell. And that's a whole nother story. But so that was my first gig. And then we did an air show, and I was in charge of the dance and entertainment in the hangar. And then David Talashe showed up with his B-17, the movie Bell.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw what I did with the Corsair, and he goes, "Hey, how would you like to paint the B-17?" I said, "Well, I never did anything that big." He goes, "Don't worry, we'll have it base coated and we'll get it ready for you to do all the markings." Well, how could you turn that down, right? So I ended up doing that. However, the actual pinup itself was done by Ron Kaplan. From what I was told, is he outbid me in doing it. I guess they gave him a better deal, or I was too expensive, or whatever it was. Nonetheless, when I got it, it had the pinup on it and the name, and I did everything else: the stars, the rondelles, the name, the fuselage codes, the serial number, all the other data stenciling, and the names that was around each gunner's position, and the kill markings that was on the left side, actually both sides of the airplane, as a matter of fact. So that was back in 1990, I want to say 96, no, 90, 98. It's on my fightingcolors.com webpage. There's step-by-step on how I did that in its own page. But so, and then that, led to other projects and other projects, and half a dozen, not half a dozen, about 24 Warbirds later, here we are. To the last Warbird, which I did, was a B-52 about a year and a half ago.
Wow. Okay. Well, so as you're going through this, you, as I said in the introduction, you literally wrote a book about nose art. Which came first, you painting on and making the creations, or the research into the book, or they kind of happened simultaneously?
Well, the book came out in 2004 with Turner. And that's another 2-year thing to try to publish something, because I was planning on putting the book together. Again, my promotion marketing hat was on. And I said, well, I mean, if I can promote and put out a book, not only will I be an author, I can now say I wrote the book on nose art, and having collect, thousands of original nose art photographs, I figured, well, a way to invest in that, to return my investment in that, is to put out a book. Now, I didn't get rich off the book, but it's a great promotional tool to say that, I wrote the book on nose art, and it was just a good step, natural step and progression in marketing, as far as I was concerned, to propel the business, to the next level, where it would validate who I am and what I do. So again, with the restorations, the book, and the business, I think I've succeeded up to a certain point, but I'm never satisfied with,
right,
what I've done. I'm always straining and looking for more challenging ways to do what I want to do in the theme of nose art and preserving history, and sort of keeping this whole thing alive. And of course, pinups, it's more of a guy thing, but I think it's all great. It's a win-win as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to a teaching tool for the younger generation who wants to know what this is all about.
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about since you wrote the book, a little bit about the history of nose art. And obviously the pinnacle of nose art is World War II, but it actually dates back quite a bit earlier than that.
Yeah, it does. I mean, depends on how far you want to go back,
Sure.
as far as humans have been fighting, in wars, in disputes and so forth. But when it comes to machines, the Romans had chariots that decorated, their, with markings on their achievements. The Vikings had, their versions, as, in their shields, and of course their mastheads, on their ships. Um, and it wasn't up until, I guess, the advent of flying, from the Wright brothers and the first Wright flyer, when the military started using for the Army Air Corps, prior to World War I, and then using that. And the development is, they started using insignia, squadron insignia, and emblazing that on the fuselages of their biplanes and in World War I. And then eventually throughout the war, things got personal. They started using and coming up with personal emblems. More, I guess, the more famous one being, Baron von Richthofen with his bright red it's a Fokker am I getting that right? Yeah.
Triplane. Yep.
And so, I mean, he was, so good and feared that he didn't care to be camouflaged. He painted a bright red, said, "Here I am, come get me." And a lot of times people would just see that bright plane and just turn around and say, "I'm not messing with that guy." But the Germans have their own version of emblems, and then later on in World War II, of course, the Italians, and things evolved to a point, but never to a point where the Americans had such lavish, I should say, creativity in artistic license in doing what they did during the World War II golden, I should say, years of nose art, where almost anything went. I mean, in Europe, yeah, you had restrictions because you had, the king and queen would come by and dignitaries, and you didn't want to be offended them or be embarrassed by a naked woman on the side of an airplane. Whereas later on in the Pacific theater, where there is, who you're going to offend there? They're half dressed natives that were living there, so anything went. Up until the last few months of the war, where Curtis LeMay finally put a stop to it and said, "Okay, we have to cover up the women or censor them or whatever." And some adhered to it, but some of the wings did not and got away with it. But it still happened. And then after that conflict, you had Korea, and it continued on again there. So it wasn't, it didn't get curbed really up until the modern day wars, I should say, after the Gulf War. I would say late 90s, early 2000s, when government started saying, "Okay, no more. We're not doing this. It's not PC." And then now you have all the specialty coatings with the stealth, on the stealth fighters. So you didn't want to put anything on those that would defeat the whole purpose of stealth, because you're painting, using conventional paint on a surface that had either nanoparticles in the paint or whatever to make them stealth. So things have changed. But however, bombers, it's a different story. Slower moving aircraft that did not need to be camouflaged in stealth as a frontline fighter, and there wasn't a problem with that. KC-110s, I would say B-52s, B-1s still have nose art on them. However, it's no longer being painted. It's in a decal form, and so it can come off easily, and it has to be approved up the chain of command through the red tape before actually the design gets put on the airplane. So there's a process now, and there are some exceptions. A flagship aircraft that are maybe an air show airplane, which may have an exemption to that. But anything that's going to be a frontline fighter, or is typically on the down low, or if there is something on there, it's not publicized. So.
Now, when we were talking earlier, you said part of your fascination with nose art is not only the art itself, but also the names that different crews called their airplane. And like you said, you'd like to know all the story of all the names that are on the airplanes. And so do you consider just an airplane that has a name on it as nose art as well, or does it have to be an actual image or some sort of artwork?
Well, that's a gray area. I consider it nose art because it is, painted on there, and it is a name, much like, folks that own boats
Yep.
have always named their, their vessels with names. I guess it was sort of a good luck thing. You have to name your boat, you have to christen it. So an aircraft was considered female anyway. She's going to get me home, bring me home. It was always referred to in the female, as a female form to some degree. I mean, you see it in movies, even with the Masters of Air. Some of the names that were referred to, and their airplanes were referred to as a she. Or bring, she'll bring you home. So it took on its own persona when it was named, just like, boats today, and it was a lot easier to remember as opposed to a serial number. I mean, serial numbers are so mundane and it's like, it could be confusing, but, Memphis Belle, Enola Gay, things like that. They're so easily remembered when you have a crew of 10 or 11, or less, even like in medium bombers. They have, it becomes a part of them. They spent their lives on the line, on there, in there, fighting. And it just only makes sense that, to have that aircraft as part of you to remember and to take with you. So, and I get it, I try to place myself in the shoes of some of the crew and or artists that, had put the names on there. So why did you come up with that? What's the story behind it? And you're right, there is a story behind every aircraft with a name on it, whether it be a girlfriend's name or somebody that somebody met in town on furlough, or, who knows what. I mean, there's a story, you put my mom's name or some quirky name because a crew, used to pee on the side of the airplane. I don't know. There was always, snafu, there's cartoon characters. There was so much out there. And there's no real bad or good. I mean, I like it all, even though there were, some excellent artists and some that were very amateur. It is what it is, as they say. I know it's an old beat up slogan, but there's a certain nostalgia now, and of course an identification tool, how we use today to look up an aircraft. We don't look up by serial number so much. It's a name. If have you heard of this airplane? It was called Alice from Dallas or whatever, and then you look up a serial number. So you start off with a name, but when you think about it, crews that were painting this back then, which was no big deal, just put something on the plane that we can call it, never realized that at some 80 years from now, we would be used as an identification tool to be able to identify that airplane that had crashed or, MIA, and who crewed that airplane. And there are people that keep logs in associations of groups and fighter groups and whatnot, where they could fill in the blanks and put the puzzles together. And then, and I don't even think you could ever complete that mission of knowing everything, knowing every name, every crew member, wherever they went to, just because in the chaos of war, a lot of that was, again, not logged in either. So we have to look at it, from a whimsical aspect and do the best you can. And as my perspective, as a business, the products and Nose Art are a teaching tool to keep that sort of art, Americana art, alive, and open up a conversation when people look at it, and the younger generation. Well, why is that on an airplane? So again, it's what I said earlier. It's a win-win. I mean, it's a great thing. I get some people may be offended by certain things, by certain symbolism, like mission markings. Why is there a swastika on there? Well, that represents typically, a shot down German. But I mean, you're so sensitive today. Is some people who don't know and naive to the fact, or I should say, ignorant to the fact of what went on then.
Yeah.
That it's easier to tear down something than actually to look up and research and figure out why it was done. Where to me it hardened me. I mean, I used to get a lot of people back in starting the day. Oh, that's lewd. Why are you painting naked women on there? Oh, yeah, no, who's going to buy that? That's just so vulgar. I don't get that anymore. Nobody bothers me anymore. And if they did, I don't care. I'm at the point of like, this is history. You don't like it, change the channel.
Yeah.
So, but that's my stance on it. I know I sort of went off on your question here. But, okay.
We've got actually a question from one of our audience members. In the nose art that you've seen, are there any striking nose art that you've seen on B-52s?
Oh my goodness, on B-52s. Oh yeah, there's tons of it. And I think the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, Rat Pat, has, much like the collection down in Midland, have actual pieces cut out from B-52s that are on display.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of them are reiterations of World War II aircraft, by calling them Memphis Belle 3, 4,
Mhm.
or whatever, or Sad Sack 2. It would be a version from World War II moving on to, the 20th century, or 21st century, I should say, in B-52. So yeah, there's plenty. If you just Google B-52 nose art, I know that there are several pages, devoted and dedicated to the artwork that appeared on B-52s from back in the, 80s, late 80s, 90s,
Sure.
current. Yeah, I see you're showing an F-86 here. That was at the Delaware National Guard, that I was commissioned to do, well, maybe 15 years ago.
Oh my.
And again, there's an airplane that was taken apart and given to me just silver, and said, okay, do the markings. And I literally only had 2 or 3 photographs that weren't that great to work with. So I had to do a lot of research, all the stenciling on that jet. And there were dozens of stencils that I had to cut, in the right size, right shape, so they could be placed in the exact location where F-86s had those safety, data stencils on them. So all that had to be recreated. The worst part of this job was to do the diagonal fuselage stripes around the gas kit, the gas tanks, the wing tanks, and
Yep.
the fuselage. Man, it took a lot of taping and striping to get that right. Because every time you go around a curve, it distorts your line, so it has to look just right. And then, all the other markings on that, the stars and bars, the Del Air Guard, Cindy Lynn Ninth, and yeah. So I mean, I was a prod papa when they had a really nice ceremony, and I was invited to the unveiling where they had another parachute, and they had all the color guard there, and the top brass,
Yeah.
the base, and they unveiled it. And I do have some photographs of that too, but yeah, that was a good day. It was a nice day, and yeah, again, proud to say, man, that came out beautiful.
Yeah.
There's the last thing I did, about a year, just over a year, and the biggest thing I've ever done. Well, it's just a nose section of B-52, but I could boast and say that's probably one of the biggest aircraft I've done, aside from a B-29. And that story, there was no nose art known photograph of this aircraft. And we looked for months up until the day that I had to go do it. We came up empty-handed. It was just only known on paper and logs as Osiris. So whether there is a photograph of this is not publicly known yet. So my task was to come up with something based on, certain specifications that they had that they wanted represented. Obviously the name, obviously, the Osiris, Egyptian god. And then, of course, they wanted the Iraq, um, state of Iraq, or the country of Iraq, on there. And then I just threw in the ghouls for the
Yeah.
different souls that were lost in that conflict. So, and I came up with, I thought, it's a great design. They were very happy. They were tickled pink, as far as, how this came out. And, of course, I submitted a design and they had to approve it, but, nothing's different, I mean, it's very different from a sketch and then the final product, because it's the wow factor when you're finished. It looks far greater than a sketch ever does. But, I was never big on sketches, but, you had to, submit something. So.
Sure. And do you do that? I mean, I understand if you're doing a restoration of historic nose art, but in this case and in others where someone says, "Well, make something for me," I mean, do you have to go through several iterations before they come up with what they want?
Yeah, it depends. Well, on the restorations, yeah, obviously, because everybody, there's a board, they have to approve of everything. But when it comes to custom panels per se, I started doing that. People ask, "Hey, can I get an idea of what it's going to look like?" and sometimes I'll just rough something out. And a lot of times, lately, for the last maybe 5 to 8 years, people just say, just go do what you want. And they usually say, I trust what you're going to do. It's going to be great. And there's nothing greater than that, than having the confidence of your customer who doesn't know what they're going to get yet. Allow me to create something for them that they're going to like. So there is some pressure when it comes to that. And so, when they tell you just do whatever you want and I'll know I like it, kind of thing. So there's a certain trust, but that comes with, because of my reputation, I think.
Sure.
People come to me because they see my body of work and they know whatever I'm going to produce. I'm trying to be humble as I can. It's going to be great. I've never really had a dissatisfied customer, that I can recall.
Good.
So, and if there is, whatever it is, I'll make it better. If you don't like it, send it back and we'll change this, change that. But again, I don't even recall that ever happening, So I may be a little bit long on projects because I'm backed up and given my health situation now, things are a crawl when it comes to painting. And even then, it's unfortunately going to come to a close where I can't do anything. So, but there are other things in the works to keep, the business and the brand going. With other products and all the artwork that's out there that we could put on other products. So
yeah, good. Well, we've got some slides that will show folks some of those upcoming products as well as we go through. Another question from the audience: is there any particular artwork that you're most proud of? And I suppose that's almost like asking a parent who's your favorite kid.
Yeah.
But are there some that really stand out that you're proud of doing, either because of the artwork itself or because of the aircraft that it's on? Either way.
Well, that's one of them right there. Mattress Made in Sadly, it's no longer there. It's now
Right.
Yield Pub. But yeah, that was a piece that I was very proud of doing and had a lot of fun in doing that. Texas Raiders, that was a fun piece to do. A lot of you folks know, the story of that. And of course, Diamond Lil, which is at that time I did it, was one of the biggest things I've ever done. B-24, and then of course Jack's Hack, a B-29 up at the New England Air Museum. However, that was all cartooned. And there you go. That's it right there. And I was never really a great cartoonist, and which is fine because I had to basically copy what was actually there on the real plane, and I think I faithfully have nailed that one, because the cartoonists who did that, there were several B-29s that had that kind of cartoon artwork on it, which tells me it was the artist that did several B-29s, because it's all very similar as far as the cartoon artwork. So that was a challenge in itself because you had a lot of different characters, and I had actually had pretty decent photographs to work from, and I had plenty of time in which to do it. So there wasn't a lot of pressure to get things done, like, well, I have to catch my plane now, so I only have 4.5 days to do this, so it has to get done. So yeah, those are the most proudest things that I've done. I mean, there's a lot of other things that were also done in different veins as far as styles of artwork. But the pinups, to me, is where I could really go to town and showcase my artwork and try to make things a little bit better than what appeared on the plane back in World War II, without straying away from, looking different, where if you're looking at a side by side of a black and white original photograph and my work, you could barely see any differences other than, well, my stuff looks a little better, which is intended to, because again, we're showcasing, I try not to dumb my artwork down, even though there are a lot of cases where I had to, in order to stay accurate and true to the actual historical photograph that I'm working with. So be it. But, when it comes to creating something on my own, where I get, 100% creative leeway, like Diamond Lil and Mattress Maiden, I'll go to town, I'll make it as best as I could, because in my opinion, it's a legacy. That's what I'm leaving, and until it gets painted over or God forbid something happens, to the aircraft. But
Yeah.
my name is going to be on that too. So it's a flying ambassador of
Yeah.
my work.
Well, and speaking of nose art getting painted over, the next slide here is actually uh, a case where you redid the nose art, but then left enough room around it so that the airplane itself could be repainted. This is the
Well,
CAF Missouri Wings
yeah,
show me, and it just came out of the paint shop. But what was the reason for the outline around the pinup?
well, to be totally honest with you, the original pinup that was on there, the anatomy was so distorted
Mhm.
that I had to make this pinup a little bit bigger and big enough to cover the old
Okay.
artwork, but still some of it was left, a little bit larger. And so this pinup, my fiance ended up being the model for this, and all we did is change the face uh, based on what their recommendation was. They wanted a blonde and they wanted a vintage looking face. So I found one that would work with the body style that was originally there, and then I just had my fiance recreate the pose to be able to do this. And in doing so, a little bit of the legs stuck out. It was off here, so I said, well, the way we could fix this is just add, a border around it. So it was like, well, black would be too black, and blue was kind of nice because it would work, as it worked with the blue shirt. And now you have the red, white, and blue sort of patriotic, I guess sort of hidden. That's another thing I like to do is use red, white, and blue, the country's colors, in as much as nose art that I can, just as a patriotic kind of subliminal kind of thing. So here you have the skin tone representing the white, and then of course the red shoes and bottoms, and then the blue top. But the national blue insignia I thought would have been a great outline as opposed to black. And it ended up by coincidence working out really well, because when they did repaint this a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
they were able to utilize, and tape things up to the point where they have now, without ruining the artwork, they had something that they could use as a border, and it worked. And all they did is, they changed the font of the name to now an italicized version of it. And I believe they did that in vinyl. I remember. It's hard to tell what is paint, what's vinyl, until you're actually up close and personal looking at it. And that was, to me, it's like, oh, the name is done in vinyl, as well as some of the other things on the airplane. So but they didn't want to ruin the art, and they knew my condition. They didn't want to have me come back, because I knew I probably wouldn't be able to finish things off if something got messed up. So it appears they did a really nice job. I
Yes.
mean, I haven't seen a close-up version of it yet, and I can't tell. There is a slight border around it still, but I guess it just was coincidental when it comes to that in the repaint, because I know they said that they wanted to repaint it somewhere down the line,
Yeah.
but it didn't really occur that, okay, to give them an extra wide border, it just, to me, looked really well to have the edges feathered out as an art, again, taking artistic license and making it look good. So in the end, it worked out all around. So
Oh, yeah.
again, it was I guess it was fate. It just worked out.
Yeah, your friend Joel Klein out in Arizona is checking in
Mhm.
tonight.
Oh,
He said
great.
his dad was in the 390th flying B-17s, and he's asking, at one point, I guess you were looking to try to be able to get some actual B-17 panels to do art on?
I don't have real B-20. I have real B-29 skin, not
Okay.
B-17. I have quite a bit of it, actually, and I did some large pieces that are hanging here in my sort of foyer. That is now everything, unfortunately, is for sale now. But I do have plenty of B-29 skin. I have some P-51 skin, a P-60 piece, P-61 piece of skin. I have a ton of F-8 stuff. I've
Hmm.
got P-33 parts, ailerons, flaps, landing gear, doors, tail fins. I actually have a full tail of a T-33 here. I've got cowls. I've got a lot of stuff. I've got, a couple of F-18 missile rails, things that I were going to do. I was going to build furniture, and I've done furniture too. But
Okay.
at this point, it's just, it's just lying around, and it's all got to go now. So we're making arrangements to have this stuff sold. We're thinking about having a large auction in a couple of months here at the shop, like an art, kind of show, and then, do a live auction to go with it. And then just, that's in the talks right now. We haven't made any actual plans yet, but it seems like a logical way that we could do this and get rid of a lot of stuff all at once. And then, people that follow me will know about it. And if they want to get on something, and there's tons of memorabilia here, man, I got some really good stuff that I know people saw here. They go, oh man, I wish I had that stuff. This is the ultimate aviation man cave. If you've ever been here and come here, you would see that. Oh my goodness. People are like, I could live here. It's like, well, as a matter of fact, I have. There was a point where I did, but, so yeah, I do have skin, and thanks, Joel, for I believe he is a customer of mine. I think he's ordered stuff from me before, but yeah, there's still going to be stuff available. However, some of the things that are already painted, one-offs that are still on the wall, are available, and but not for very long. So
Yeah.
Because I'm not replacing that stuff anymore. So
When you wrote the book, you probably spent a lot of time figuring out how to interpret the differences between black and white, which is probably 99% of all the nose art that we see is in black and white. And how did you make the transition to know what colors are represented in that? I mean, some of them are kind of obvious, but there's a lot of subtleties in black and white.
There is, and you have to know what to look for. And I didn't know for the longest time that there were two film types available to the consumer to buy film when they were, taking pictures back then in their box cameras or their, whatever, 8mm, there's small film. There's panchromatics you could see there, and orthochromatic. And it wasn't until I was doing research for my book and I started coming across photographs, and I'm like, wait a minute, these look different, and I started realizing, hey, maybe I'm doing something wrong here. I'm not painting the colors right. And I'm looking at the more pictures I look at, the more I see the two film types, there are inconsistencies in the shades. So I decided to call Kodak, the archive department up in Rochester, New York, prior to my book coming out, and talking to some of those people. They're like, oh yeah, there's two film types. And I had a question, and I sent them, I emailed them photographs. It's like, what color is this, to the best of your knowledge? And he right away said, oh, this is panchromatic film, and this is so-and-so. I was like, huh. He says, how do you know what to look for? And he goes, well, it's just the different sensitivities in the film picked up different shades in the positive print. So in panchromatic film, reds appear to be very light in shade, and where orthochromatic, you look at that same red, like in the kill flags, it looks black.
Yeah.
So, and then you're looking here, look at pudgy, right? The Roman numeral 4 looks black on orthochromatic, and in panchromatic, ooh, it's very light. That can't be black. So I started to realize and go, I really have to scrutinize my pictures better when I'm doing historical replicas of these panels. So, and that's how, the more I studied, the more intrigued I got. And I started to get real good at just looking at a picture already, just knowing, identifying, just like the Kodak archive people know that what kind of film I'm looking at. So it helps in knowing and having this information, because I see a lot of decal companies, aftermarket companies, and even artists, just get the colors wrong. Mm-hmm. And so much to say restorations that come out. So I'm always have my, pulse on, on the heart when it comes to waiting for something to come out and crossing my fingers. Hopefully they got the color scheme right. And a lot of times it is right, and a lot of times it's not. And without naming names, there are a lot of things out there that it's just not right.
Yeah.
Here's an example, Dallas Doll. Luckily, those guys, were very nice, And I approached them when they just came out with that and they did the letters in black. And I said, you know, I mean, you guys did a great job, but the lettering should be in red and black. And, you know, who wants to hear that? Oh, you screwed up the paint job.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm trying to be nice and diplomatic about it. And I said, look, here's some photographs that, you know, back up my evidence, you know, as evidence. So I showed them photographs and like even that picture right there, you saw the black and white one. You could see that it, you know, to an untrained eye, it looks like it's just one color. But if you manipulate the photograph and boost the mids or change this and that, you could clearly see that there's two colors. There's a main color and then an outline color. Black will always be black, no matter what film you're looking at. However, reds, browns, dark blues, which have a lot of pigment in them, are gonna, you know, be heavy in the spectrum of light when it comes to positive prints. It may look black. So, having said that, when I brought this up to their attention, they said, okay, we'll take a look at it. And you know, obviously they were, you know, they kind of questioned themselves too. And they did that sample. The guy's holding up a sample and you can clearly see that that red pops from the aluminum as opposed to black. Because black is just basically on aluminum, or I should say aluminum is just shades of black and white. So they're never gonna show up very bright on that aircraft as opposed to red. And the artists of the time knew that. They knew red was the dominant color and the color of choice to use on natural aluminum aircraft. Look at that. Look how that pops.
Mm-hmm.
So when I showed them the black and white film and boosted up and they could, you know, you could clearly see there's two colors, they went back and redid it and then re-put it out and republished photographs of that aircraft. And of course, you know, they got a lot of praise for it. And they actually were nice and gave me credit for doing so and you know, helping them correct the colors. However, not every restoration shop is as kind as they are, but you know, I'll produce my own version and say, well, this is according to my research, this is what it is, what it should have looked like. And I did that with Glamorous Glenn, the P-51 Jaeger's airplane, where the lettering on that is red with a black outline, as is Gentleman Jim, which is out there flying around. So there are aircraft out there, and you know, I may introduce myself, say at Oshkosh, and saying, "Hey, this, you know, I'm Gary Velasco. I'm the guy that gave you a hard time with the colors, and if you ever want to change them, you want to know what they are, you know, I'm here, I'm available," and you know, it was a way of trying to get business, but not everybody adheres to it. Not everybody wants it that way, and it's their airplane. They can do whatever they want. Right. But as a historian and what it is that I do, I just stand my ground. This is it. You don't have to like it, but this is my best educated guess on how I think, you know, it should be based on my, you know, 26 years of experience of looking at black and white photographs every single day. I have some around me right now that I get, that I ID and acquiring, and I have over 8,000 original Noah's Ark photographs. So to me, it's valuable in the fact of looking at something firsthand, not a digital copy, not a printed copy that's got a moire pattern. So, I mean, there's nothing like working from originals.
Yeah.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I like it. Well, and not only have you done aircraft panels and nose art on an actual aircraft, but also jackets. Quite an extensive selection of jackets that you sent photos of.
Well, and that's just a small bit. And I never had to advertise. I never really wanted to do A2 jackets because people would just ask me anyway, and I would just do them. I didn't need the extra work. And then finally, you know, there were a lot of people doing it, and I was like, okay, whatever. I'll post some here and some there. And the more I did that, the more work I got. And then, you know, you be careful what you wish for sometimes, you know. So like I said, right now as it is, I'm really backed up and trying to get everything I have out now and not take anything new. Because I've got very patient customers who are willing to wait, you know, for their masterpiece to come in the mail and, you know, where they can hang it up or wear it. But yeah, you know, jacket art, it's a different medium. I use different paints for this, different brushes. And of course, it's just a whole different style and look to do things, because now you don't have to adhere to anything historical unless you're trying to recreate something historical on an A2. You know, I get really elaborate. You know, people have the budget and they want to do this. Sure. they'll pay for it. They don't care. They know what it's going to look like. And it's going to be, I was going to swear there, but I'll say it's going to be excellent, you know?
There you
So,
go.
and you know, I'm proud, you know, it's wearable art, you know, and there are a lot of guys doing this kind of work. So I don't need to compete with that, you know, but you know, I'll take orders on people that can afford me to do the work. And if I have the time to do it, I'll do it, but I don't need to advertise. I mean, I do it now and then just because, hey, it comes with the, you know, the nature of the business, right? It's still pinups and artwork and nose art per se, but you know, it's fun. It's different, you know, it's a different medium, but I don't know. You know, I have several of my own that I've done. I barely wear those. So I can't wear everything. I can't put out everything. So, and I'm happy if people are willing to do it for themselves
Sure.
and commission me to do it. So it's all good. It's all fun. But thank you for putting that out there.
Yeah, well, and it's been alluded to a couple of times during the presentation, but you're facing some health challenges that are going to be very life-changing for you. So, as you mentioned, you're kind of transitioning into what's next for Gary, and how is that going so far?
Well, I mean, I have a positive attitude. I'm a positive
Obviously,
thinking
yeah,
person, you know, and you know, why dwell on the negative? You know, I mean, I'm a kind of can do all whenever I could. You know, when people quit and you know on a project, is I said, give it to me, I'll do it. You know, I can make this work. You know, and that was just part of my growing up training of my dad. You know, telling me, you know, locking me in a room with a problem and you know, say, okay, I'm leaving now. You make it work, fix it. I don't know what to do. He goes, well, use your brain. Here's a hammer. Here's a screwdriver. Make it work. I had no clue what I was doing. And sometimes I was successful, sometimes not. But the whole point of is the learning is the challenge of making something work, figuring problem solving. And I think that helped in creating, the artwork that I do when it comes to the metal, blueprinting. I don't do any CADing. I don't want to get into that. I mean, even my blueprints are very amateurish, but at least I know what I'm doing. Where I can turn it around and give it to my CAD people, and they could turn, my drawings into parts. And then I still have to put it together, rivet it together. But
Mhm.
either way, it has to work, right? You got to put those parts, got to fit. So, so I was able to teach myself a lot when it comes to that. Teach myself marketing. Teach myself to paint. Teach myself, how to work a Mac and create stuff on, in Photoshop and build a website or whatever. I mean, but I can't do it all anymore. I mean, I try to focus in now on what I can do. And again, that is tightening up a little bit now as far as my limitations is concerned. But so I could still work with a computer and do digital art. I could still take existing artwork, manipulate it, put it on products, or have when people call me, hey, we want to put your stuff on tumblers, we want to put your stuff on handbags. Okay, what do you have in mind? What do you like? And then we can go through my archive and come up with something. So that's the future. It's going to be products. It's going to be merchandising, but featuring my artwork and highlighting my artwork. The apparel line, I want to grow that. There's the Hawaiian shirts there. So I want to do things historical with that too, based on the artwork I've already done. Why not? It's a form of self-promotion, yeah, but it's also promoting my artwork without really infringing on anything else, because it's my artwork that's being put on there, not somebody else's artwork or a rendition of somebody else's artwork. It's stuff that I've done. So that's, we're creating more and more of that stuff. We're coming out with a deck of playing cards that are custom. That's going to be awesome. We should have that in a couple of weeks. Waiting for another batch of Hawaiian shirts for the Flying Tiger shirts that you just saw. So we're going to expand that line with a P-51 shirt, a Shangri-La shirt, and then 2 Corsair shirts, a B-17. I mean, it's endless when you think about it. However, my time is not endless. So I'm going to keep doing what I can do, and then hopefully, somebody in my family will take over. My fiance, she doesn't need another job, but she kind of supports me and likes what I do, so she can help whenever, as much as she could. I mean, there's a legacy here. When you think about all the work, the body of work that I've done over the 26 years. I don't want to let it go. After, it's like finished, gone, no one to take over. So I'm trying to set up something that legacy in my artwork will live on to some degree, and if somebody can take over, that's fine too. I do have, a couple of artists that, I'm feeding artwork to, where I can't do it anymore, and finish off some of the stuff that I have because I can't. So, and I'll continue to do that, as long as people still want sort of my brand, my look, where I could, match that or find another artist to work with that can match my, capabilities and style to be, called a Finding Colors production piece or something that came out of the shop or, whoever the artist is has to sign it anyway. That's their, signature. It's their hand that did it. So they're entitled to, to endorse it by putting their signature on it. I mean, that's just natural. So anyway, yeah, see, there's a beer company that came up with a beer can to match the CAF Capital Squadron. The artwork on Doris May of the TBM. So they did a limited edition run of those beer cans, and I came out for that. And I still think I have a couple of 6-packs left that are unopened just for posterity, And I did drink some, and it was good, but it's neat. I have tokens all around, here in the office of things that I've done that are on other products, beer companies, distilleries and stuff where my artwork appeared on labels. And, again, there's so much stuff that, it can't be all said in this one session of the body of work. So, yeah, I mean, I'll talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Well, you mentioned, the possibility of an auction to try to raise some funds, but I guess the two big things that if people do want to support you is you do have a GoFundMe page, which is up and running, and you see the link on there, and we'll also put the link in the description when this goes on YouTube, so you can support it that way. And then, of course, you mentioned Flying Colors, and so from the Flying Colors website, will this contain all of the new products that you're coming up with?
Eventually, we're going to do that. We're going to redo the website and take down some of the custom stuff that we've done that's no longer going to be available, and we may put that in an archive kind of format. But we are going to put all the new products that we're going to have. I think the Hawaiian shirts are already up there. Tumblers are not up yet. And as things progress, there'll be a whole brand new updated site with what will be current. However, if you need to know what I'm doing on a daily basis or whatever, or what is new, Facebook is the best way to see, what I'm doing, either my Gary Velasco page or the Fighting Colors collection fan page. So those are the two ways also that you can see what I'm doing on a more interactive way where I'm actually hands-on. So if somebody has a question, I literally within either minutes or within an hour or two can get back to them on something that, they may have a question for or a project that they want to have me work on.
Good. Well, and speaking of questions, we have several from the audience yet. Do you know of any superstitions that were attached to nose art? And secondary to that, were there any other like classic locations where nose art or insignias or something was put on an airplane? You mentioned around the waist gunners on the Memphis Belle, but were there some others as well?
Yeah, I mean, there was no rhyme or reason of where artwork appeared. Generally, it was on the nose, but yeah, there was some fuselage artwork, and it depended on what they wanted at the time. But generally, the focal point would be on the nose. But yeah, the gunner's position, typically their names would be on there, or a nickname. Sometimes there might be a little caricature painted on there, or even a pinup that would have been doped on, cut out from the calendar, and then doped onto the airplane in lieu of paint. So superstitions, I don't hear too much about that. I have heard though about one from a nose artist. I think it was Hal Olson, who's passed on now, who told me that the crew would come out regularly and just as if they would pee on the tire of the airplane as part of a good luck thing. I don't know how it actually started. Maybe some guy did and they kept doing it. And then at some point the whole crew did, just as a sign of solidarity and would do it also. And it just, again, superstition, you know. But there would be, even in the Masters of Air, I think there was somebody that had, what was it? It was I'm trying to remember whether it was a figure or a medallion or something like that. They would, you know, carry on with him. And then one time he wasn't able to go on a mission, so he gave it to, you know, another crew member who filled in for him. So it's like a good luck charm. So he would come back, and of course it worked.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there were times where it didn't, you know. I mean, again, there's just fundamental superstitions that, you know, to help make you feel better that you were doing something right, or just a higher power maybe that, you know, was looking after you, your guardian angel or whatever, you know. And then of course that translated into names of airplanes sometimes. So again, if you picked up any book on nose art, you would see a lot of those names in there. And funny as it is, there are a lot of rock bands that were named after nose art, whether they knew about it or not. Motley Crue.
Oh,
Right?
sure.
Everyone's heard of that, right? There was an airplane, B-17, called Motley Crue. Now, it didn't have the little, you know, dots over the U and the O.
Yeah.
You know, that's one example that comes to mind that I know that was, you know, names. King's X. There's another.
Charlotte the Harlot.
Charlotte the Harlot, which was an Iron Maiden song. There was nose art on a B-25. So, I mean, there are a lot of names, because I've got books on, you know, indexes with names on it, and I'll go through it and I'll like, hey, that's a name of a band. So I still haven't found one called Aerosmith yet, or AC. But, you know, there are a lot of band names that are in there. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. I wonder if the band knows that, you know? So it's funny how that works, but, you know, it's just, you know.
Yeah. And you mentioned actually having like a photograph, you know, on the side of the airplane. Richard Bong's P-38, I suppose, is the most famous one with a photograph of Marge, who eventually became his wife.
Right.
Were there any others that had that kind of large format picture that you know of?
No, photographs was odd, and the weird thing about Bong was, I heard from, you know, Marge Drucker herself, was that he wasn't keen on nose art. He didn't like the new. He was Mr., you know, Coca-Cola, you know, straight up. His only vice was smoking cigarettes, I guess, you know, because he's always in a photograph with a cigarette in his hand. But he was always a very clean kind of, you know, Christian, kind of clean cut guy. So he didn't want anything, a pinup on his nose art as far as his airplane is concerned, because he flew many P-38s.
Right.
And but the well-known one was, you know, the Marge with Marge Bong's college photograph on there, which he had blown up and doped on to the plane. Now he had to replace that, from what I understand, several times, because it would rip off in flight. You know, because the paper back then was pretty thick when it comes to, you know, something that's a big, heavy poster, but it wasn't a printed, it was a photograph. So it was photograph paper. So you could imagine, you know, having doping that on there, which is, I guess today, gluing it on, but back then, you know, it was dope, you know, but which is a whole different nasty chemical, you know, itself. But yeah, and that's what he wanted. And I've never really found any others, at least I take that back. There was a couple of other examples where I saw pictures of, you know, let's say, you know, a bust, you know, and headshot of somebody on the side of fuselage of an airplane, a P-51. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but there was several. Jane Russell, I think, was on one. I think it was an AT-6. I saw her on the side of. But yeah, there were some examples, but it wasn't, you know, something like you saw with paint all the time. That was a rarity with actual photographs or calendar pinups that were doped on in lieu of paint, you know. So that was obviously a lot easier to do than commissioning somebody to paint, you know, a pinup on that, and not knowing how good it will come out, you know. So.
Right. Yeah. So in your research, another of our viewers is asking, have you been able to discover why Adolphe Galland picked Disney's Mickey Mouse as his cockpit nose art?
I've heard stories. Obviously, I don't know any firsthand accounts, but I've heard stories. He was a big fan of, you know, Mickey Mouse, you know, Disney. back
Okay.
in, I guess, what, the late 20s or 30s, when the first iteration of Mickey Mouse, because it obviously evolved into the one we know of today, which is a lot more refined than the original version. But he decided that, you know, he liked Mickey Mouse. He wanted to keep that as his personal emblem.
Yeah.
And even his staff car had that, you know, that stencil painting on it.
Oh,
And that's what he chose. I mean, again, the Germans didn't put a lot of pinups, if any, you know, on their airplanes. It was more personalized with emblems, you know, fierce fighting, crows, or, you know, just, you know, animals that were, you know, I don't know. They just, I don't think they understood our sense of humor when it comes to that, you
yeah.
know, and but it's brilliant when you think about it. You know, if you have a naked woman painted on a B-24, and you know your enemy's coming at you, they're looking at, because back then it was close quarters, you know,
Mhm.
combat, right? And they could clearly see, and it was enough distraction that maybe another waist gunner or top turret gunner could get a bead on him and take him down, right?
Yeah.
So it was a good deterrent in a sense, in his own, you know. And I don't even know if they were aware. They might have been, you know, they might have been, but it wasn't purposely done just to catch him off guard. You know, it was just one of those things that kind of helped out, you know. So again, it was another aspect of help winning the war
Yeah.
by, you know, the glorious, you know, pinups, or in
There
my
you go.
case, fighting colors. You know, I mean, that's hence where the name came from. I lucked out on that too.
There you go. Well, we are at our time, but I want to give you a chance to just kind of share any final thoughts that you have for our audience tonight.
Well, I thank everybody for their support, watching and or post, or have you know, been following, you know, my career, you know, or just learning about, you know, what it is that I do. I'm a very easily obtainable person to talk to get a hold of online. I really can't get away from it. Just from, you know, you just Google me, and you know, I pop up everywhere just due to the nature of the business and all the projects that I've been involved in. I can't really hide. So why? You know, I'm not really, I'm private to a point, but I love people. I love talking. I love telling the stories, and I love furthering the agenda of nose art, and to keep that aspect going for as long as you can for the next generation, whoever's going to carry the torch in, you know, as far as being a teaching tool, you know. And again, you know, I have this vast collection of actual nose art photographs. At some point they got to go somewhere, because I'm not taking any of this stuff with me. So you know, hopefully that other people can learn from this and take the knowledge that, you know, I have put forth, and take it, you know, to another level. Maybe, I don't know if there is such another level, other than coming up with new ID information on aircraft that's not been known, or have not been found yet, like the old pub, you know, which is, you know, again, Madras Maiden, that got repainted as such. There is no photograph of that airplane that has surfaced yet, and for good reason. If you know the story of behind, you know, that airplane and that last event, there's good reason for that. But I have another take on how the name appeared on that airplane, based on, you know, Charlie Brown, the pilot of that airplane, his recollection and how he saw the name and read it when he was talking about the actual name prior to going into his, you know, one of the final missions. So yeah, I mean, somebody's got to move forward, you know, with the, you know, restorations will still happen. Somebody's got to paint them. And hopefully, you know, they have either watched this or read my book, or at least taken some aspect of what I've done, and keep that in mind in when they're doing their work, so people can appreciate what they're doing as well too. So it's just, like I said, carrying a torch. But I'll be here for as long as I can, doing what I can. And like I said, if everybody needs to get a hold of me to talk about and discuss something, yeah, I'll be more than happy to do so.
Sounds good. And as Gary mentioned, you can find him on Facebook. We've got the other websites we'll put in the description. So if you'd like to support him either through the GoFundMe or the Fighting Colors collection, either way, we'll have those available for you. And also thank you for joining us tonight. You know, we'd like to hear your thoughts on tonight's episode, or any ideas you might have for future topics. So please please feel free to drop us a line at media@cafhq.org. If you liked tonight's show, well, please share it across your social media channels. And if you didn't like it, well, I'm sorry. Don't share it across your social media channels. But if you do subscribe on YouTube, make sure you click that bell icon and get some notifications when our new programs go on the air. All right. So until next time, I'm Steve Buss. Thanks again to Gary Velasco, our guest. Wishing you blue skies and tailwinds. Till next time, have a great night.